I am APAP.
I am APAP, Association of Performing Arts
Professionals.
I am APAP.
I am APAP.
I am APAP.
Presenters.
Producers.
Performers.
Promoters.
Prototypers.
Provocateurs.
Peer support.
Possibilities.
I am APAP.
I am APAP.
I am APAP.
Artists.
Educators.
Mentors.
Board member.
Agents.
Risk takers.
Managers.
Students.
Colleagues.
Partners.
Community.
Family.
I am APAP.
I am APAP.
I am APAP.
我来自 APAP. Je suis APAP.
Yo sono APAP.
Ich bin APAP.
私は APAP です。
Soy APAP.
We are APAP. We are APAP.
Please welcome Conference Co-Chair Liz Lerman.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, whichever it is for you. Just before we get into this really amazing session, just a thought. You know, I think there was a time when people danced and the crops grew. I think people danced, and that's how they healed their children. They danced as a way to prepare for war. I know that because we've learned some of those dances. You know, I think probably there was a time civic bodies, people gathered, governing whatever, wouldn't consider making a decision without having the people who convey imagination, blessings, strife, ways of dealing with conflict in the room with them. I think every generation recreates that over and over again. One of the great things about this session today is we're going to hear a group of contemporary artists reenacting, re-embedding, refinding ways to make sure that our art is in the world and that the world is in our art. We're not the only people here today. We've got a bunch of people watching us live streaming thanks to our colleagues at Culture Hub. These people are all on Facebook Live. You want to wave, tell them, hey, we're so glad you're here with us. Yeah. We want to thank ICM Partners. They're sponsoring this morning's session. And while we're thanking our sponsors, there's a whole bunch of people that have made this possible. You know, in the spirit of these few days, just to encourage everybody to be, of course, we're grateful for this amazing support. And we want to work side by side with our funders so that we can continue to be bold and brave and make the decisions we need to make into the future. Our host for this couldn't be a better person. Will Power, to me, is one of the great pioneers of our field. Will put things together before we thought they could go together. Will saw things way before any of us could see them. And he's managing to continue to, put shape to these ideas in a way that brings so many people in to see it. If you haven't met Will, you should corner him in the hall, find out what his projects are. Incredible. He's a beautiful host, an amazing mind, and we are so lucky to be in his hands for the next hour and a half. Will?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. And it's not often you get to be introduced by Liz Lerman. So can we give her a hand for all the stuff she's done in the field? That's like, I got bragging rights from now on. It's like, what do you do? I was like, I got introduced by Liz Lerman. That's all I got to say. Anyway, thank you all for being here at this plenary this afternoon. This idea, we're going to be exploring transdisciplinary collaboration. And this idea of cross-sector partnerships across divides is something I'm very passionate about. And in prepping for this event, I got the chance to talk with many of the creatives you're about to hear from in a few minutes. Got to see some of their work, and you're in for a real special treat, I promise you. It's not always easy to cross disciplines and collaborate, right? As a matter of fact, it's not easy really to collaborate, period. I mean, you put two theater artists together, it ain't always easy, you know what I mean? If you step back from that and you're in the same field and you're in different disciplines, that can be even more crazy. So for example, if you're a writer and you're trying to collaborate with a choreographer, or you're a visual artist and you're doing a project with an instrumentalist, it can be difficult because every discipline oftentimes has a different, distinct language, yeah? Different rules, different principles, and it can be tricky to do this. I remember one time I was working on this play called The Seven. This is about maybe 12 years ago, and we were doing it at this downtown space called New York Theater Workshop, and we asked the great, iconic Bill T. Jones to be the choreographer. And to our great joy and surprise, he said yes, right? And I'll never forget, we were in rehearsal, and this was Bill's one of his first experiences in an equity theater production. This is before Spring Awakening, this is before Fela, and so we were in rehearsal. If you ever watch Bill work, he's like very focused. He's like laser sharp, like just nothing moves, right? And he was just focusing and working with the cast. And I remember the stage manager in the production, she gingerly stepped up behind his left shoulder and was like, Bill, we have to take a break. I remember he was like, yes, break, yes, break, you know, trying to hold it together. And it was, because ain't no actors' equity in the dance world, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? In the dance world, Bill T. Jones is the equity. You dig what I'm saying? It's difficult. It's difficult. Now, the creatives we're going to hear from today, they're taking a step back even further. They're crossing complete fields to work together. So we're going to hear from a designer/skateboarder who's working with an arts leader who's in partnership with a jazz composer. We're going to hear about a project that a choreographer is developing with a neuroscientist. And we're going to hear about a project that a nationally known poet/spoken word artist is working with a local social worker, a local community activist. And so how do they do this? How do they cross these seemingly vast oceans and communicate with these different languages? What are the challenges? What are the things that are successful and exciting about what they're doing? And perhaps more important out of all those things, what is the impact? What is the potential when developing transdisciplinary projects and collaboration? What can be the impact locally, and what can be the impact beyond that? So that's some of the things we're going to be talking about in this Pecha Kucha or Pecha. How do you say it? Which one is it? Pecha? I like Pecha. Can I say Pecha? It's a little more jazzy. Pecha, you know, more cool. You know, hey, how's APAP? It's good. I'm going to Pecha. You know, it's kind of cool. So anyway, Pecha Kucha, Pecha. And just a little about this format. So this is a form of storytelling where people are going to be presenting things and speaking with you while slides are running, and everything is automated. So the trick is that the slide runs on a 20-second or 30-second count every time there's a new slide. So they have to try to lock to the slide, but at the same time, keep you engaged in the moment. So if it looks like something is off, it might not be off. It's just that's the way it runs, you know? And this form was invented to kind of keep people kind of succinct, condensed, and really keep it moving, okay? So the format is going to be, we're going to have 3 amazing presentations. Then I'm going to engage them in a conversation, and then we're going to open it up and have a full dialogue with questions and comments from all of you all. All right, sound good? Sound good? All right, everybody say Pecha-cha. Pecha-cha. All right, good. I know it's wrong, but it feels good. It feels good. It's so wrong it feels right. You know what I mean? All right. All right, so please put your hands together for our first amazing cross-disciplinary team. This is Christina Soriano and Christina Hugenschmidt. Please give them a warm welcome.
All right, let's go, Steve-O. We Christinas are a choreographer and a neuroscientist from Wake Forest University and School of Medicine. And our work together investigates how improvisational movement can change people's bodies and minds, especially older adults.
As a dance artist, I have become intrigued with improvisational movement as a practice that can foster agency for older adults in a busy world full of change. So if you will, I'm going to ask you to practice improvising with me. Imagine that you are conducting an orchestra. Beautiful. Now imagine you're conducting traffic. And now, can you do both at the same time? Great.
And now I'd like to ask you, if you were regularly challenged to do exercises like that with spontaneous physical reactions rapidly, do you think it would change the way you think and move through the world?
As a dance educator, I've been fortunate to be involved in several pilot research studies that have investigated the ways improvisational movement can improve balance and mobility in older adults, including those with neurodegenerative diseases. This is a video of a participant from one of these studies. On the left, you see my friend Debbie. She's living with Parkinson's. And on the left, she is before the study, and on the right, after the intervention.
This video is actually what started our collaboration. So when I saw this as a neuroscientist, what was so intriguing to me is that Christina's improvisational dance intervention had profound effects on people's gait and balance and movement. But she wasn't training gait or balance. She wasn't even doing repetitive exercises the way we think about doing exercise or rehabilitation. In fact, she wasn't even telling people if they were doing the movements correctly. Nevertheless, she was clearly having an effect on people's brains and having effects on brains with an active neurodegenerative condition.
Next, you'll see images of some of my friends who participate in an ongoing community class I offer in the Parkinson's community and their caregivers in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We always begin in chairs, everyone responding individually to a series of rapidly delivered prompts. Each prompt elicits a sea of spontaneous, self-generated movements where every response is the right one. We practice multitasking and problem-solving in safe, effective ways like this, where we've created now a chaotic, disheveled space that's intended to mimic life's hectic environment. Here you see people practicing our prompt walk pause. You simply practice personal agency, deciding when and where you walk in the room and where, when, why, and for how long you pause.
As a human being, I can see that Christina's work changes people. As a neuroscientist, I believe that if we can see that change, we can also measure it. So there are a lot of different questions that we could ask with this work, but the NIH put forward a call for grants, and so we selected a couple of questions that we thought would fit for that call for grants. So one thing we did is we changed the community that we were looking at from people with Parkinson's disease to people with early stages of memory impairment. So what you see here is data from our pilot study that we've used to illustrate our hypothesis, which is that participating in Christina's movement intervention can benefit really profound secondary symptoms of memory impairment that can impair people's quality of life, like decreases in social engagement and changes in gait and balance that lead to increased risk for falls.
Part of the evolution of our collaboration has been a deep appreciation for the arts and sciences together in conversation. The process of writing grants and publishing in medical journals about our work together has forced me as an artist to have to articulate what it is I'm actually practicing in the dance studio.
So our work together has pushed Christina to be more quantitative in her work, and it's also pushed me to be more qualitative in the way I think about my work.
So Liz Lerman's Hiking the Horizontal is critical in this conversation. Hiking the Horizontal reminds us that art and science don't privilege one over the other, but they need to be equal collaborators and partners. And similarly, as someone who's a dance professor, I have to think that academia and community also share equal space and time. To this end, for 3 years now, we've hosted an interdisciplinary conference at Wake called Aging Reimagined. And at our symposium, we bring in world-class speakers from different fields in the arts, sciences, and humanities. Our first keynotes were Liz Lerman, who is a MacArthur Genius Award-winning choreographer, as you all know, and who epitomizes the theme of this APAP conference, as well as Dr. Jay Olshansky. He is a demographer who studies maximum extension of lifespan, and his work's been on the Discovery Channel and National Geographic.
At this conference, at this symposium, we only have one track. And we mention this because we got strong pushback from both sides of the fence here, where both artists and scientists wanted us to have a separate arts and humanities track and science track. But we wanted people to come and listen to ideas that they'd never heard and may even be challenged by. So another piece that's important to us in this is community. So we have speakers in this symposium who are on an equal platform with these world-class speakers, and about half the attendees are from the community.
In the spirit of Hiking the Horizontal, my work as a choreographer and director of an undergraduate dance program has evolved to include intergenerational dancers. I've been fortunate the last couple of years to collaborate with a live music festival in Winston-Salem and premiere new evening-length works with renowned musicians and dancers in our area. This is an image from the Goldberg Project, which featured 26 dancers ages 4 to 86. And then in 2017, our community returned and this time we worked with music by Patsy Cline. Science and art may seem disparate, but we see commonalities. We're both engaged in rigorous modes of inquiry about the world around us, and we're informed by each other's understandings.
One of my favorite examples of this is falling. So the picture you see here is how we see falling in geriatrics. It's a vulnerable older adult. It's a dangerous situation. The technical definition of it is coming to rest unintentionally on the ground or a lower surface.
Yes. This is not how we see falling in dance. Every step we take is falling. Falling is a way of transferring weight. It is beautiful and it has meaning.
I love hearing Christina talk about falling as redefining your relationship with the ground. So she tells participants in her community class with Parkinson's disease that falling is going to happen, but maybe we need to learn to be more comfortable on the ground and even learn more efficient ways of getting back on our feet. And I hear that and think, what if that's what we said to our aging patients when they came into clinics? Maybe it's time for us to redefine our relationship with the ground.
Give it up. Thank y'all. Christina and Christina, give them a hand. Wow, that was fantastic. I have tons of questions, but we got to keep it moving. We'll have a time when we get there later. That was awesome. Thank you all. Our next presenters were on their way from Canada, and it's a little cold up there, and they got stuck in the snowstorm. So they're on their way. They're going to be at the APAP conference. They're going to be able to engage us on Monday, but they're not going to be able to present right now live. However, in the true spirit of being present, they made a video last night, right? They made a video last night with their slides. So it's a Pecha Kucha video. So unfortunately, we won't be able to engage with them in a dialogue, but we will be able to hear a little bit about what they're doing. So this is from Ahmed Nomadic Ali and Dunia Noor. So let's just still give them some love, even though they're not here. A little communal love across the country. All right.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Well, kind of. We're all the way over here, but I wish I could be there. Thank you so much for having us here. My name is Ahmed Ali. I am the current executive director and one of the founders of a poetry collective called the Breath in Poetry Collective. We use poetry to engage the community. We usually say we breathe in experience and we exhale poetry. The quote is by a late poet, a New York poet named Muriel Rukeyser. I strongly believe as an artist, as a poet, that we are walking anthologies and that our pages are filled with experience. The thing is, our content and our cover might be different, but never judge a book by its cover. Myself, you might not be able to recognize, but English is my third language. When I first arrived to Canada, I only spoke Italian. And if it wasn't for my ESL teacher who believed in me and who invested his time outside of me just being a refugee, I wouldn't have been here today. And it was my ESL teacher, in fact, that taught me that true leaders and true motivators don't build people, they provide the tools for them to build themselves. And as an artist, I use that approach a lot. People don't know this, but your surroundings define you. You are who you are surrounded by. Everybody in the audience, do me a favor for a second. I want you to take your fingers and go like this. Make a quick ring. I want you to take this, I'm watching you, and put it underneath your chin really quickly. Now, how many of you put it on your cheeks? Probably a lot of you did. And the reason why that is as human beings, naturally, we just imitate our surroundings. And a lot of youth workers and a lot of social workers don't recognize that regardless of how much interacting you do with youth, if they are stuck in the same environment, it's going to be difficult for them to change. And what I recognize as an artist is when you welcome newcomers or you welcome kids that are quote unquote at risk into a new environment full of art, where you empower them to be themselves and you value their imagination and their identity, they start to change. They value themselves. A lot of the youth that I work with do not trust social workers or any officials. It's because of that mistrust that they don't want to change. But as an artist, they don't care about me. I just come in, I do poetry. I'm that guy. I'm that funny guy that comes in. But we change gradually. And my intent is never to make somebody change, it's to give them the tool for them to find who they are truly and for them to change themselves. And speaking about change, a person who's really been in my community who has helped me in helping people and even helping myself to learn is this wonderful human being named Dunya.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Dunya Nur, and I am really privileged and honored to be sharing with you some of my experiences, my story, and most importantly, my working progress and processes and learning from Ahmed Nomadic, our local respected artist. So a little bit about me. I've been doing community development work for 7 years. I've been working with prison youth that are serving time in the prison system for about 4 years. And yeah, I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot. Well, maybe I should start with how I met Ahmed Nomadic. So this is me sharing a little bit on a vulnerable level. I met Ahmed when a family member of mine was actually going through a lot of experiences and trauma, and he was coping with a lot of self-harm and addictions. Our family did what a lot of family who love their family members, we basically followed that same step, which was how do I fix the problem and what is the quickest solution and why is this happening? Sometimes we even blame the individual for the choices and the decisions that they make. So I reached out to Ahmed Nomadic, who actually helped my cousin, and he was there for my cousin who was coping with severe alcoholism and different types of experimentations with drugs. Luckily, what I have noticed is Ahmed's approach was not, I'm here to fix you, I'm your savior, I'm going to protect you. It was more so of, where are you at? What do you need? What is going on? What is this pain you're in, and how is it being? Where is it coming from, basically? I've had the opportunity to actually watch that at the age of 19, and that's when I enrolled in my social work studies, and that's how I started working with the community, and I ended up doing a lot of restorative justice work. And it was Ahmed who actually is my mentor and who inspired me. Yeah, I never actually told him this, and it's awkward that we talk about it live right now. So basically, one thing that I did want to say is, as a young person and as a woman of color, empowerment is a very big thing in our community, especially when it comes to working with the nonprofit sector, when it comes to working with different funding streams, and sometimes we're put in a situation that we're competing for funding and we don't have a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of trust issues, there's a lot of lateral violence issues, especially for a community that have faced a lot of structural and discrimination and healing from colonization, and we have that trauma. So one thing that I have learned from Ahmed Nomadic after my first supervisory role working for RAP Ed, it's an Edmonton pilot project, 5 different nonprofit organizations came together, and it was wraparound high fidelity model, which really focused on key principles of every youth and family should have voice and choice. They should be the leader of their team. They should pick their team. We should really stress a lot on self-efficacy and really provide whatever they need. So I couldn't have thought of anyone that is better to do it, to bring a lot of the youth that were going through stuff in our community, bringing Ahmed Nomadic to be part of that team. Did it work? It absolutely did. Ahmed has empowered youth in so many different levels. He actually mentored them. He gave them the opportunity to express their feelings through words and poetry and go live and perform their feelings. Why is that important? Because a lot of the youth that we work with are used to suppressing their feelings. So when they're given an opportunity to actually express themselves in a way that is appropriate, and we accept them for who they are regardless of how they express themselves, as long as they're not harm to themselves or others, it was a phenomenon. Some of our youth are mentors. They are coming to the community. They know that that unconditional acceptance is there for them. Ahmed and I are constantly right now working on a restorative justice project, community mural project, arts-based project, and I'm just really privileged to be working with him and to share some of those stories with you.
Thank you very much, Dunya. And the thing is, me and Dunya, we're on an equal level, and the majority of community we work with are like at a common level. Nobody is higher than anybody, and we don't pretend to be experts. Everybody has the equal understanding of how it works. One thing is for certain, if you want to help out people, don't come at it like I know better than you do, and the best way to do that is to come in vulnerable, and who is more vulnerable than an artist? So that is why communities should engage with artists to go in and support youth.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
All right, great, great. If you ever get a chance in person or even online to see that guy Nomadic perform, he's a phenomenal performer. So if you ever get a chance, just Google him and check it out. They are on their way. Like I said, they won't be here for the Q&A, but we're going to do a special breakout session with them Monday at the Morgan Suite, I believe, at 9:30 a.m. So if you have any questions or comments, you want to connect with them, follow up with what they said, Morgan Suites, 9:30 a.m. Monday morning, okay? All right, let's move on to our final presenters, and then we're going to move into the conversation section. I want to introduce three amazing individuals, wonderful talents. They're doing a lot of great things in the field and developing this fantastic collaboration. So please put your hands together for Ben Ashworth, Garth Ross, and Jason Moran. Come on. Hey.
Morning. Morning. Hello, everyone. Or good afternoon. All right, Steve-O, let's do it. Finding a Line is a multidisciplinary initiative that we describe as an ongoing, community-sourced public art project. It's cultural co-production at the intersection of music, art and design, filmmaking, fashion, photography, and whatever else is described and inspired by skateboarding.
Finding a Line for me is an outgrowth of my youth. In the 80s, my brothers and I would skateboard all around Houston. And we weren't skating, we were listening to a bunch of music and watching skate videos. And sometimes the music on these videos was jazz. This is legendary skater Mark Gonzalez working with saxophonist John Coltrane, two innovators speaking the same language in different mediums.
When you're street skating, you deliberately throw yourself into a chaotic sea of cars, people, and surfaces, and then force yourself to synchronize and merge with the moving city around you. You can fight the waves and drown, or find a line, ride the waves, and make it up as you go. This is Rose Jaffe, making it up as she goes. She's working on an all-night stream of consciousness painting in response to an all-day music and skate jam session.
And together, we're on an exploration beyond the borders of our individual disciplines. It's somewhat uncharted territory, but it's also very familiar. The merging of histories is a natural phenomenon in the arts, and great improvisers in every discipline are known for their ability to adapt quickly. So Finding the Line is our gift for navigating all of the potholes.
Institutions are not necessarily known for our ability to adapt quickly. For institutions, change is hard. We'd prefer to plan a year or two out than make it up as we go. But Finding a Line is helping me understand how organizations, just like individual artists, can become great improvisers, and artists and communities are the ones to teach us. For artists, a grounding in theory and fundamentals is an absolute requirement for improvisation in any discipline, including jazz and skateboarding. So the same is true for organizations. Institutional improvisation must be an expression of an organization's theory of change rooted in its mission, vision, and values.
So how do we create the right conditions for improvisation? We must remember that jazz is inherently a freedom music. Systemically oppressed African Americans formed a music tradition full of narrative storytelling told through these improvised solos. So these solos each map the beautiful but yet flawed history of America. So these layers are intense. So each solo you hear is a reminder that having a place and a moment to speak your mind is a political act. Jam sessions are the place for this. These loosely structured gatherings are where the new ideas are explored and the boundaries are tested. Sessions are typically for the insiders in the creative community, while the performances are for the public.
With Finding a Line, sessions are a process for bringing ideas into form with the public. In fact, every element of the project was developed in sessions, from building the stage to booking the bands. What you're looking at is a build session to set up a part of the evolving stage and do a trial run within the DC community before it landed at the Kennedy Center.
This approach of producing in sessions feels risky because it is risky. But we need to figure out how to embrace this kind of risk. One way is to share it. Finding a Line is a platform for shared risk-taking, and sharing risks makes the unprecedented possible. We share risk by sharing knowledge, experience, and perspectives, And as organizations whose missions are to serve the public interest, it's our responsibility to learn what the public is interested in. So make time for conversations, ask questions. After all, we don't want to supply something there's no demand for.
And you have to make room for unexpected things like this to happen. Keep in mind, this is an audience member skating a Steinway. Okay?
Yeah.
This lightning strike moment could only happen because the skater is in a state of flow, taking risks, with musicians taking risks, and the producers all taking risks together.
Yeah, right. And we share by learning to trust one another. And any great band knows that, you know. So the work is informed by something much deeper than the aesthetic trends, or it's about revealing the possibility of the future. And we push on the form, applying the pressure to see what the institution can extract.
I love this moment when Steve Caballero is sliding through the corner of the bowl/stage. It's his third attempt, and Jason and his band are right there with him, willing it into existence, and the audience is all on the edge of their seats, willing it into existence, and we all seem to converge with one another and simply be passing energy back and forth.
One member of our community named Tatiana Kalina summed this up perfectly. She's a skateboarder, fashion designer, and entrepreneur. And she said, for me, finding a line means finding my own line in life. It means getting out into the city, discovering other people, and discovering myself.
So through Finding a Line, we assembled a powerful team of skaters, musicians, organizers, activists, photographers, designers, carpenters, kids, adults. And we all took something very different from Finding a Line. And for me, it continued to validate the idea that joining together would always be better than segregating. So having artists and institutions display their complexity through the form will always propel the conversation forward, both inside and outside the institutional walls. Do you fall that hard for your work? Your work and all the work will be criticized, and it will be painful, and people will break their arms, but you will definitely stand up again. And like the Christina said, we all have to learn how to fall.
Even local government is coming to this conclusion. After talking for over 2 years with staff from across several DC city agencies, we're now working with residents to design, build, program, and maintain Finding a Line parks in neighborhoods across the city. So now, it's time we take all these ideas out into the world together and do the hard work of taking risks, understanding that we will be improvising, making it up as we go. And when we get lost, let's let the artists and communities we work with be our guides. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
All right, we go straight over there.
All right, all right. So quick. The thing that you said, that both of you all said about falling, was very profound. I'm going to meditate on that one. It was kind of deep. I wanted to ask you two, Christina and Christina, about collaborating. You all come from different fields, but you're housed in the same institution, in a way, right? The same university, Wake Forest. So I wanted to know, like, what are the advantages of working from these vastly, seemingly, you guys are bringing them together, but these seemingly vastly different fields, but being housed in the same institution? What are the advantages of that? Is there something about that that helps or supports the collaboration? And then are there any challenges that come with being in the same institution but from different fields?
Well, one thing is that the institution is the same, but it's also slightly separate. I'm in the School of Medicine, so it's physically different, and actually our financial systems and things are managed separately. At the same time, it really is helpful to be in the same place and know a lot of the same people, have some shared resources and things like that. I would say those are benefits.
It'd be nice to not have to pay for parking every time I go to the hospital, but
it would be nice to be able to get on the internet when I go over to her campus.
Yeah, I think sometimes a disadvantage is I'm a dance faculty member, and I spend a lot of time at the Stick Center for Aging Research, for healthy aging and Alzheimer's research. So sometimes that feels a little odd, perhaps, but.
And one thing we've talked about is just the way the university structure isn't always helpful for that. Money flow is always important, right? And money in the university structure goes through departments. So when we're doing really strongly cross-departmental work like this, it means that our departments have to be committed and allow us to have time to do something that they're not getting credit for or isn't directly benefiting students within that department. I don't really teach, and my position in that way is a little more flexible. If I get a grant, then I'm supported for doing that grant no matter who I'm working with. But I do think on the undergraduate campus, it's a little more rigid within departments, and we've had some conversations about that.
You all said one of the advantages is that there are people that know each other. You said something. So there are, I don't know how many, well, your collaboration is quite unique, but are there other departments, other schools in conversation in different ways, or is that a rare thing that exists at that institution? Not to put that institution on Front Street, but
We do have, Wake is very, very collaborative, and I know at least on the medical school side, when we have people come in from other places like Yale and Harvard and places like that, they say that we are uniquely collaborative, and they've been really surprised at how genuinely friendly people are. I think another kind of cool thing, one of the things that I study with one thing that I study is networks, brain networks, but also just network structure, like how people and things are connected. And one interesting thing about where we are is that it's very small. So that means that it's easy to make connections between people, and it's easy to kind of move within that network. And that's nice.
And a challenge might also be recruiting the numbers we need for our study, too, as a result, because we're in a city that's a small to medium-sized city, and we need a certain number of people enrolled in our study, and there's lots of different research studies that people can enroll in. And so we have to be very artful about the way we describe enrolling in a dance study. I call it a movement study. And then I get them to admit that they are dancers.
Right. And when you're working with folks in the community, particularly on dance and choreography, do you bring in that concept of falling as well? Is that central to that, or is it that something that's more like outside of the studio? And if you do bring it in, how do people with Parkinson's or people with, how are they reacting to that concept of reimagining what falling is?
People don't fall in my class unless we're practicing falling safely. But people will come into our community class maybe with a black eye from having fallen at home or in a public place earlier in the week. But we don't necessarily address the fall or how they got up. They, I think, use the class time as a way to practice their best physical confident selves to maybe go forward in the rest of the week and perhaps, I mean, you're not seeking out a fall.
Right.
The idea is if I do fall, can I efficiently get up, or can I by practicing regularly a dance class, can I perhaps avoid that situation? So that's why that image, for instance, of the chairs all disheveled, we were talking about this, I don't want to avoid a scenario which is a reality, which is a disheveled, crazy, hectic thing. People race in front of you, cut in front of you, children run by, skateboarders, whatever, right? So how do you shift weight and know how to be in that space and not be afraid to keep living your public best self, even with this kind of a diagnosis?
Okay, cool, thank you.
It'd be really cool maybe to get them on skateboards. Maybe that's the next
That's the next step. Mega collaboration. So Garth, you said something about early on in you guys' presentation about institutions. I'm paraphrasing, but institutions have a hard time what'd you say?
Oh, I was just joking about that.
But I know. But there was a collective chuckle of like recognition here. What did you say? You said institutions oftentimes or sometimes have
a hard time changing, have a hard time learning to adapt, and yet, Jason addressed what are the conditions we create for improvisation.
Right. So I really like, two-part question. One is, Why is that? Because I think a lot of times in the field we take that as a given, that some institutions change quicker than others, but overall institutional change is slow, as we just went. So does that have to be? Why is that? One, and second of all, if you guys can elaborate a little bit more on how, you talked about it some, but you could talk about how projects like this help to kind of get institutions out of that kind of lack of being able to function and functionally change.
Sure,
Yeah?
sure. So to your first question, no, institutions don't have to be that way. I think it's a symptom of a profound sense of respect and responsibility that people in institutions feel that they have to take for the traditions that they are stewards of. So it tends to orient them towards looking backwards, like how is this done, meaning how has this been done? And that's not, I mean, that's like a responsible way to think, or so it seems. Then you pull the lens back, and when you're always looking backwards but walking this direction, you're going to bump into stuff and fall over. So organizations need to figure out how to be both effective stewards of tradition and also generators of new ideas, new techniques, and new traditions perhaps. And this project has been like a complete learning lab for me as a producer, because it put me in positions of risk and literally not knowing what was going to happen, where my superiors were asking me, hey, what is going to happen? The truth of the matter was I didn't know what was going to happen, and these guys were like, we don't know what's going to happen. So
in what way do you feel like it changed or is changing the institution?
Jason, I wouldn't know. I mean, I think one part about working in an institution is not looking for quantity analysis that shows up on a page. It's watching this child who I watched every day come with his mother, that child we saw the second to last photo. He would come every day with his mother after school to come skate. She would bring him every day to listen to music and to skate. And then they go home and they do their homework. But that also is part of his homework. Part of his homework is to hear creative music.
That's right.
Part of his homework is to actually feel like the space is his. Part of his homework is to have his mother understand his craft, right? It's all those things happening at once. And that's one story of thousands who came to the Kennedy Center for 10 days to skateboard in front of it. So, I mean, for me, it seemed very natural. These are the things that live together in my mind. And to have an outward expression of it, and to have the space and the luxury of support, real support from the institution, to say this is a thing that we need to do also for the city. And for a community that we don't even really know or acknowledge that exists, a skateboard community, and their relationship to the art forms that happen inside our institution on a daily basis. So then it starts to open that door to the people we do not serve. The communities that we continue to say, you're not part of this conversation because you don't know nothing about Bach. Well, okay, that's false first. It's false. And this way that we kind of serve the same pamphlets to the same people is a disservice to the rest of what America kind of has to offer. This is a part of that thing.
And Will, I can give you one specific of how does it change things. Leading up to the first Finding a Line festival, it had been years of conversation about skateboarding as a culture and how it might fit at the Kennedy Center. When Jason did jazz and live skateboarding at SF Jazz, and of course he's our artistic director for jazz, when he brought it into the center and said, hey, do you think we could do this here? So many people at the Kennedy Center who have been bending their ear for years said, oh, Jason wants us to try to do this thing, maybe we could do this thing. Okay, so it was still a 2-year process to get the first Finding a Line festival to happen. You saw a highlights video briefly from 2017, the one that had Bandaloop in it and lots of other folks too. When we started talking about that festival, we said, okay, and you know, like, Finding a Line will be a big part of it, and everyone was like, oh, yeah, of course. I mean, wow, right? It took us years and years and years to get that across the transom, but once it's there and recognized as culture and people know what we mean by it when we say it, then people just nod and say, oh, yeah, that's cool, that's welcome here.
And when did you did this last year?
Oh, we did it in 15 and 17? Or, yeah.
Do you feel like, and maybe this is hard to, like we were saying, Jason, maybe this is hard to kind of quantify, but do you feel like people who've come in through this project, because a lot of times, sometimes like an institution will do an amazing project and then the people won't necessarily return for other things, you know what I mean? Either because the institution is not reaching out to them, or because they're like, well, that's not for me. And so it becomes a one-shot deal. Did you find Not that you have to, but you find that people would be more open to coming back to the Kennedy Center for something else, or do you feel like they just look specifically for things that like this?
I want to invert that.
Yeah, please.
And we don't know, particularly because a lot of this was free events, but we did not undertake that project as a one-time festival. It's an ongoing initiative. So when I say I want to invert that, we, the Kennedy Center, didn't step away from this community. I'm not sure they're coming and buying tickets to Bach. They might be. We're not tracking that. But I can tell you that we are continuing to work with Ben.
To engage,
and the community. It's not,
fair enough, fair enough. So for you all, what's next in this process of this collaboration?
Well, I'll just quickly.
Yeah, please.
And you should talk about our study,
Yeah.
but that's how we thought about our interdisciplinary aging symposium. So the themes are the same, but we're coming to them in different ways every year, you know, and it's mind, mobility, meaning, mortality, and memory.
That's all right. Long day. I get that. I understand. I got you.
Yeah. So, but like you don't hit those topics one time and then you're done.
Right.
Is the point. And so, so we want to keep that symposium going, and we have a study to start.
Yeah, I mean, the most immediate thing on our plate is that we got an NIH study funded to do a randomized controlled trial of Christina's work. And we are almost through the red tape so that we can start bringing people in and actually get it started. So that's going to be a lot of work for the next couple of years.
If you live in the Winston-Salem area and may qualify, you can contact us.
Please talk to us.
All right, cool. So I want to ask a question specifically for Ben and for Jason. So is there something that is unique and specific to the aesthetic of skateboarding and the conception of jazz? I know that's vast, but that lends themselves to be in partnership. In other words, could you do something with skateboarding and rock and roll? Skateboarding is funk, skateboarding hip hop, or is there something specific about the form of what you each do that makes it not better than the other thing, but just more specific or more unique to bringing those two things together?
I have a particularly bad habit of putting on headphones and doing what I was describing earlier about throwing myself into the seemingly chaotic experience and trying to turn it into a flow state. And I think that you're able to see beyond the surface of things. And we were talking earlier about how the very idea of a handrail, which is designed for safety, is inverted. And you're taking this history of surfing, a wave of energy, and you're taking this movement vocabulary of addressing the lip of that wave and projecting it onto the city. And you're performing the city, and you're being chased out by security guards, so you're forced to be moving all the time. You're sessioning the city, and you're improvising in a way that's so similar and right in line with how I think jazz musicians discover and reimagine new forms. So we're performing the city and creating this radical merger of performer and architecture. There's theorists that call it you're creating super architectural space. So you're radically reimagining that city. So I think that it's there's obvious parallels of the experience of producing new forms as a process of sessioning.
And also they're both underground communities. They're not communities looking for a lot of flash and lights. They really do evolve in privacy. And the idea that people work on a craft that when they show it publicly still looks very subtle. Like many people who listen to jazz, like, I don't know what's going on. Why are you all moving like that? Or if they watch the skater come down the street, well, I don't know why you're spending all day trying to figure out this one trick that doesn't even look fancy. You know what I mean? Like somehow, so our practices are very kind of covert in that way. They're full of code. That's how jazz is implanted. That's what it is. Skateboarding decides to say that, well, I don't really need the huge skate park. I just need the city, right? I'll use your work to enhance my work. And when things work like that and when tools get reimagined, then possibilities kind of occur. That video we showed, Mark Gonzalez with John Coltrane, I mean, those two people couldn't be better matched as kind of real innovators. Mark Gonzalez still skates all over the city today. He's like 50-something years old. You will see him down on Canal Street. Where I saw him at 12 o'clock midnight. I was just randomly down there walking around, and here he is.
What you doing down there?
And there he is, working on a trick.
Right.
Over and over and over. And for like 40 minutes, I watched him, and then he never got it. And he was like, well, I'm going to try it 15 more times. And I was like, look, I got to go. But that's, every musician I know is that.
Right.
Every musician I know works on their craft that much. And then, you know, so for the skater, they have to kind of sometimes do it in public. There's a thing that they're trying to imagine that they see in their mind, and they're trying to reach for it. That person falling off that ramp is trying something. You know, they're reaching, really reaching for this idea, right? They feel it in their body, and they're reaching for it. And that fall is kind of like, oh, I just maybe missed it, but I know it's still there. And so, and the artist never gets out, that idea never leaves their mind. When they've imagined this thing, they have to kind of see it through to the end.
Yeah, that can be rough, but you got to do it.
It is rough.
One more thing. So, performing the city, what does that mean? Can you tell us a little?
I'm grabbing from a lot of different
Yeah, no,
writers,
I'm
like
yeah, but
Henri Lefebvre's Production of Space,
Yeah.
and Ian Borden's Skateboarding Architecture
Yeah.
of Space. Stacy Peralta
Yeah,
talking about
so what is
merging
it-
with the city. So you're saying performing the city.
Yeah, what does that mean? You said that. What does that mean in the big scope of things? And then what does that mean for your
Okay,
craft
so-
and for this collaboration?
So as an educator,
Yeah.
right, it's my task to work with students who we've taught them theory, and as they're transitioning out of school, I need to teach them to bring theory into practice. You can't do that in that space. It's my task to provide spaces in the public realm if they want to be public arts practitioners so that they can work in that space with the communities and maybe rub shoulders with researchers who are equally lost in their practices in this shared territory out in the world, right? So that we can perform and reimagine what it is we're all doing here, right? You cannot get stuck in tradition. We all know people who, they know it inside and out, but they're bound within that language. They're not practitioners falling and discovering new territory.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right.
We all hear all the world's a stage, but skateboarders like really do it.
Yeah.
And we're not invited.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, literally the whole city is your canvas. That's really deep.
Yeah, and you got to keep moving. So it's a blessing that forces you to thrive in the face of adversity. Right.
Okay, we got almost 30 minutes. I like leaving a lot of space for the audience. I hate like discussions when we all talking and say, we got 3 minutes for questions, you know. Hate that. So I really want to leave a lot of space. So we have time for questions, conversation. Of course, if nobody has anything, then it's like, we're like, oh, you know, we got to go back in. But we should have a couple, we're going to have a microphone here. Thank you, Craig. And a microphone, they got it. So if there's any questions or comments, anything you're curious about, please feel free to step up. Now, I will say that sometimes it's like, you know, no one steps up at first, but then at the end is like a long river of people. So get in now, get to the front of the line, and, you know. All right.
Hello, thank you for being here today. So I heard a lot about the dance informing the science and the skateboarding and jazz with the Kennedy Center, and I'm also wondering how it comes back to the art. So as in, like, how did the science change some of your dance or inform some of your dance, and how did working with the Kennedy Center inform some of the skateboarding, if that makes sense? I don't know, I heard a lot of one direction, so I'm curious about the other direction. Thank you.
That's good.
I'll just say something really quick. I never thought that I would say this, but I'm growing to love data.
Oh, I thought you would say more because we've talked about this a lot. I mean, it's been an interesting thing because Christina she's a mover, so her language is movement. And the language of science is obviously numbers and then also writing, because we have to write and communicate. And the process of trying to write up these concepts and ideas that she routinely acts out, trying to put them into writing, trying to put them into a protocol, trying to convey them to other people in that way, I think has very much been a process that is influencing you.
Well, and assessment, we talk all the time. We started our work together, and I would often say, I just know things are changing. I don't need to have this scientific stamp of approval, but now I actually have found that I crave the knowledge of that, and I like read articles through journals I never thought I'd look at, but also I noticed too where the gaps are in assessment, where dance could learn a lot from the way scientists look at movement, and scientists could learn some stuff too about how we talk about dance. Yeah, there's these growing symposiums that are popping up about embodied cognition, for instance. And I'll be on a panel with someone who has a neuroscience and dance lab, somebody who is a leading researcher in tango and Parkinson's, a group up in Canada, to the Toronto people that we saw, people at York University that are growing and studying this. I think of mentors like Glenna Batson, who's now doing this work in Ireland, who really informed my path. Liz?
I was also thinking about this point of one of the interesting things that we've discovered about movement is that there are a lot of different communities that engage with it in different ways. So dancers think about movement one way, neurologists think about movement in another way, physical therapists think about movement in yet another way and document it in another way. Neuroscientists, yet again, think about motor movements and document it in a different way. So one of the things that Christina has been working with some other moving people like David Leventhal and people like that is trying to get together, is there some way to tie these ideas together? Like, could you take Laban analysis and put that with motion capture or with some of these really clinical tools that physical therapists or neurologists use and help to create a common framework where you can communicate across those disciplines?
Just overhauling a little bit the assessment tools, the toolkit.
But it's really important to have dancers and artists and their perception, the way they think about movement at that table and having that conversation.
But do you think, and maybe it's too early to discuss, but do you feel like it affects your dance practice meaning like inside the dance studio, not just the theory of it, which is important, but does it affect the way you approach? I was trying to get to her question. Does it affect the way you approach it as an artist in the studio or
I think I
on the
pay
stage?
attention differently. I'll give a quick example. In an early pilot study, we were testing something called the timed up and go, which is a traditional PT. It's standing up, walking, turning, sitting back down, more or less. And somebody doing the timed up and go, who was a participant in our study, living with Parkinson's, did this. And that was more efficient in his mind, but someone with Parkinson's would never say, oh, I feel confident, I'm just gonna, go backwards in space. So, but there was nowhere in the assessment to test or to note that as an important discovery, as an important place for him as a physical person in the world, that he found that confident detail. So it's ongoing wherever the woman, I don't know that these are questions that will be the ones that fortunately we can keep going. Yeah, we'll never tire of it.
Okay, let's go. Let's go here.
Hi, thank you for being here. I have a question about the challenge when you work with different community groups on the sort of cross-disciplinary projects and the experience happens and you meet these folks and everyone has this experience, but how do you make that relationship continue, like with the skateboarders in the Kennedy Center or the artists? And how do you have that longevity on these projects, as you then move to other groups to put together?
Take a whack at it, yeah. The evolution of our institutions and our audiences, there's only the long game. Like if we're trying to address it in the short game, let's go do something else for a job. So it really comes down to design of a project. I learned from making many, many mistakes in community engagement that I was building drawbridges when I was intending to build bridges, meaning that after the project was over and I rolled it up and the crossing wasn't happening anymore. So we really design differently now for the ongoing. So we call this an ongoing community-sourced public art project. It's an initiative, not a festival. Even though there are moments in time that are festivals, you saw clips of that. And ultimately, and I think I might have taken this from a conversation with you, our metric for success, one thing that we can count that perhaps we weren't counting before, is relationships, both the depth and quality as well as the number and quantity. So if we are building new relationships that we can continue, then we're doing a decent job in this long game.
And that ramp is still public, right? Where's the...
Oh, that was, okay, wow, good point.
It's at Gallaudet University.
The ramp from the first Finding the Line went to Gallaudet University, which is a university for the deaf, and in fact they use it as a learning lab for robotics and data visualization, believe it or not, and then Ben continues to host sessions there, and the Kennedy Center brings artists. I mean, we continue Finding the Line out in the city, and that's what inspired the DC Office of Planning, and then subsequently more agencies to work with us with the next ramp. So the 2017 ramp is the one that's going to go into a community in Southeast DC, and then we're going to continue this process. So again, it's about, yeah, thank you, it's about design for continuity as opposed to design for event.
And you really have to do it, to keep it authentic, you really have to stay connected with that group and allow them an equal stage for creative control, right? And that's everything from this weekend, we got to work on the ramp and we got to figure out what band's going to come and play. And if you got some money for a band, you put it towards that band that's in the city who showed up to help cut the grass, right? For me as a skateboarder, I have a very, it's hard for me to represent them because a lot of them don't want you to know that there's an underground that exists that's thriving right now. They prefer to be, to not formalize what we do. And so it's a task to figure out how to merge what you all do and what I do and celebrate one another. And yeah, that's it. That's what I got. Yeah.
Okay, yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Sam Simon. I'm jealous of the Christines. I have one show called The Actual Dance, which deals with mortality. It's the caregiver's voice in an end-of-life journey. And I do not love data. And I know that people's lives are changed by experiencing my show because they tell me. And I'm frustrated because I have performed at Sloan, I performed at Johns Hopkins, I performed at UVA Medical, but I don't know how to connect. I don't want to be a researcher. I don't want to be a scientist, and yet I do want to work with them, and I do want to outreach. And for me, it's a dilemma, and the jealousy is it seems like you guys either knew or worked close to each other and found each other and said, wow. But if you don't have that, how do you figure it out? And maybe there isn't that. Maybe it's just, I've got to go spend time and talk to people differently.
So I just think hospitals need more artist and residency programs throughout the country. That's one thing I'm committed to writing a grant to this year. I've just now said it publicly, so I really have to do it.
Go ahead.
But I think that's a critical thing, is that there are too many spaces. You were talking about this, Jason. There's too many spaces where we feel we don't belong, and I think hospitals, clinics, those spaces are often those places. And so, I think that is a systemic change we as this group of people, we can do that. We can change that.
You might also find some of those connections with nonprofit groups. Like I would think the Alzheimer's Association, if you're having a hard time engaging with local hospitals, and I do think more hospitals are starting to get arts and medicine programs. Frankly, the one where we are is very, very weak, and that's part of why Christina is trying to build it up. And our collaboration was very like happenstance. But it literally was because I saw her video. But I think that sometimes those nonprofits might also be a little more open to some of the interdisciplinary work and might help you to make some inroads.
One of the challenges I've faced, and I will mention because
please do, yeah.
And that is a lot of these associations and American Cancer Society won't even accept a proposal. They won't accept even looking at my script, which is sort of a process, because they get so many.
So here's a wild idea. What if the American Cancer Association had a meeting at the same time as APAP, right? Or we had these seemingly, different groups actually having locations at the same time where
people could connect.
These almost like Joe Good calls them collisions. I'm looking at Melechio. These collisions can happen.
Cross-pollination.
All right, thank you for that. All right, yes.
So for the Christinas, I have a question about what other disciplines, like you mentioned physical therapy, but like PT, OT, acupuncturists, other kinds of folks that are dealing with, neuropathy and diabetic communities and stuff like that, and how have you brought those other disciplines into it? And for the folks in BC, I'm wondering how this community engagement is informing this wonderful modernist structure that sits away from any neighborhood and is completely physically disconnected, and how what's happening in the work that you're doing is informing even the improvements that are happening there now on the campus.
Yeah, kind of a quick answer on that. The National Symphony Orchestra, this is just an example of how we're thinking about and how we're actually taking steps in this direction. The National Symphony Orchestra has a wonderful program called NSO In Your Neighborhood. And they work with a lot of community partners that they've developed over the years, and they co-develop programming and during a week a year, which certainly is not enough, but the orchestra is out in the neighborhood in force as the full orchestra and as small ensembles. In any case, that process has built so many strong relationships in situ, out in the city. And we are looking at learning from and with our colleagues in the National Symphony Orchestra to expand that program to Kennedy Center in your neighborhood, with the goal of, if you will imagine the Kennedy Center with all the different disciplines we have within it, working in each discipline in neighborhoods, really fanning out and having lots of new relationships. Imagine Kennedy Center in your neighborhood, and then finally your neighborhood in Kennedy Center when we get that building up and running. So the relationships that come into that building they're authentic, they've got some years under their belt, and we are able to, and this is our goal, and this is how we express it internally now. Our goal is to increase stakeholder influence over Kennedy Center programming.
I would actually, could you clarify your question a little?
Well, just as someone who's had injury and had to deal with a lot of different things within the medical field, both from a neurological standpoint and then from a physical and occupational therapy standpoint, the delivery of medical care is very fractionalized, and so it often takes the patient to run a string through the pearls. And so I'm curious as to how the fact that you're working together and how other disciplines in that continuum, like from neurologist to orthopedic surgeon to PT, OT, dance, so on. Right?
We're not patients. So, to some extent, the questions that we're asking are different, and the way that we engage with the professionals are different. I would also say my home department is geriatrics and gerontology, which is maybe not a great term, and it's a little bit outdated, but it's a particularly broad field where we take a very holistic view of the human being. And a lot of times when geriatricians are involved, there's quite a shortage of them nationally, in fact. But when they're involved with patient care, what they're often doing is trying to take people off medications. And so they're calling all the different specialists that you're talking about and saying, you have my patient on 15 medications and we need to take them off 10 of them. How are we going to do this? So I think that coming from that field too, that's also, we happen to live in a very I live in a very cross-disciplinary part of the hospital. But we don't, the patient challenges you're talking about I see as a little bit separate, and I don't see as something that we're directly solving ourselves. Sorry.
Yeah, I wish I had more conversations with neurologists who I see them more regularly than they see their patients, some of them, because they come weekly. But there isn't a great mechanism set up for me to be like,
No, and we've talked, so we've got some lovely movement specialists at our hospital, And Christina's met with them. They know about our work. They came to a performance that she did at a local art museum that had an exhibition of chairs. So she had her dancers come and do a seated dance in the different chairs with the exhibition. One of the neurologists came to that. He loved it, but he still doesn't know when our classes or tell his patients to go there. You know? So I feel like sometimes even when you really try to make those engagements and you even make it actually happen, maybe it's still not what you want in the end, and you just have to keep trying.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that hat is working.
How are you doing? My name is Christopher Calloway Brooks. I'm the director of the Cab Calloway Orchestra, grandson of Cab Calloway, and y'all are late to the party. My granddad was doing this back in the 20s and 30s.
Howdy, howdy, ho.
That's right. It really was a huge part of my granddad's success that led me to your venue back when I was 17. But in studying what my granddad did in crossing genres, combining fashion, for example, as you see with the zoot suit, with new forms of dance and the jitterbug, with, of course, the jazz tradition, which at the time when he was doing it, of course, it was really cutting-edge jazz, big band jazz. But he brought the tribal element as well to it through the responsorial. All that being said, in studying his music, what I found was that, and his whole style, I should say, is that he's sort of combined through simplification. It's a lot like the Dutch artist Piet Mondrian, who had the most simple colors, basic colors and geometric shapes, or any of the cubists. They simplified dramatically what it was that they were doing, but combined it in such a way that it created this new complexity that the, I guess we could say, the unfortunate inventor of plastic coined the term synergy, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And that it is that energy between the disparate elements. Now, in looking back over his career, over the decades that he was active, one of the things that he really encountered as a resistance to what he was doing was the genre channeling. That's my own little sort of term that I've coined. And what that means is that when you simplify, which is essential to create successful collaboration, to me, what happens is that the people who are involved with a particular genre are only sensitized to the subtleties of that genre and don't recognize the energy of the synergy. So people would look at a zoot suit, if they were from the fashion world, and say, oh, that's just a suit that's too big, that's been trimmed a little, it's very simple. People who were, say, jazz purists in the bebop era would say, oh, well, his music is so simple because it's so blues and it's so tribal in its approach. Or people who looked at it from the dance world would say, well, the jitterbug, you know, is not a very complicated dance. Or linguists would look at it and say, well, what is this jive language? What is this? Why is he bringing this simple street vernacular in and polluting the English language? And that is, to me, the fundamental issue that we face in creating these kinds of wonderful new collaborations that you all are actively involved with, that I absolutely love, is figuring out how to, A, get people to recognize the synergy of the genre combination, and B, be able to recognize within themselves their own tendencies towards genre channeling. And what's the last point that I'm going to make is that what was amazing about this, and what was amazing about my granddad's success, was that even though all of the academics in various genres went into their channel and said, oh, this is simple, the vast majority of the public absolutely loved it. They were crazy about it, and he had a tremendously successful career because they were not so caught up as to be able to succumb to their own prejudice. And so in this world that we now live in, where we have, you know, leaders who seem intent on resegregating, what I think is important for us to recognize, and what I'm asking you, is how you've overcome the genre channeling and how you've been able to get the synergy recognition.
Well, first of all, Cap Calloway, our praise is due, and I have my jive dictionary at home too. And also, you know, when people talk about this, they always say, oh, how are you coming up with these collaborations? I always point to this era. I always point to 1920s, 30s, because you're looking at the image, you're looking at set design, you're looking at stagecraft, you're then looking at choreography for the camp, you know, Nicholas Brothers, you know, you're looking at an entire production. Now, how and on earth were these musicians and performers kind of getting this work to this level and at this scale, which seems so foreign to us now, right? So I always look at that, and that's my goal. It's like, how do I get to that scale that your grandfather had, right? That shows up in stormy weather, right? And these films, and we get to see it, and we know it exists, and we know what we do now is minuscule compared to what they accomplished in a time when you could not accomplish much after you left that stage. So that, for me, has always been the cornerstone for what I aim for. So a collaboration like this also then like lets this gate open, right? Lets this gate open for people to flood into the place who might not necessarily be there. And for me, I need to see that. And when thinking about this collaboration at first, I really just thought about, oh, you know, I like the music and I like watching skaters, right? Okay, great. But the people who then showed up, the audience that showed up really blew my mind. It was parents coming with their kids who liked to skate. And parents wanted to listen to some good music. and there was like thousands of them. And I just thought, oh, well, I hadn't thought about it that way, you know, which, you know, when you work with an institution, they want you to think about it that way. Who's going to buy those tickets, you know, if there's some tickets for sale? But when I think about really like what the tradition that I fall in, right, the tradition that I carry so strongly, of which your grandfather and you are a legacy of, it is on how do we build scale that also is so rigorous and yet so wide open at the same time. It's very difficult to find that real channel that we can kind of like tune people into and people understand what they're experiencing. It's just, I don't really get to experience it much.
Hey, Jason, to answer your question, I would feel that my response would be that simplification leads to universality.
Yeah, that's why
There's some truth in that, definitely.
I was just going to say that's why the prompt of one of the exercises is move, pause.
I would say there's one kind of simplification that we are not super open to, though, and that is a simplification of the idea of arts and science being that merger being limited to rehabilitation or in a therapeutic kind of way. And a lot of times when we go places, people ask us, like, oh, so you're doing dance therapy. No, she is an MFA. She is a choreographer and she is an artist. And what we would like to communicate to people, which is a little more nuanced, is this idea that an arts practice can and should be part of your life. And what we are trying to study is this idea of incorporating an arts practice and teaching people who are treating people who are coming in and participating in this as artists and co-creators. So when she does her intergenerational dance project, the dancers in that are paid. There's a performance, they are paid performers, and they are treated as human beings. So even though they may be coming in with a neurodegenerative disease, we marginalize older people in a pretty horrific ways in our society, but they are on stage themselves and being honored for that and represented as artists for that. And I think that's an important non-simplification of this combining work.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, we gotta move on. Thank you, brother. We just got 3 more minutes. We got one more. Oh, fine. Last question. Perfect.
Hi, Bill Bragan from the Art Center at NYU in Abu Dhabi and Global Fest. And Jason, I was struck by the story of watching the skater practice a move kind of over and over and failing in public. And I think we talk a lot about permission to fail on the artist level. And I'm thinking back to Will's question to you, Garth, about why is it that institutions are so slow to change. And you talked about the metrics for success and how you redefine that. But I'm also wondering from an institution level, especially as you're trying to build an ongoing initiative that's not a drawbridge, what kind of conversations were there about a threshold for failure on an institutional level so that if the audiences didn't come, if somebody broke their arm on the skate ramp, if the press wasn't there, that it continued to be an initiative that would come back the next time and didn't get shut down because it wasn't fully meeting your metrics for success from the get-go.
Wow, such a cool question. Thanks, Bill. We definitely, and we talked about it in the presentation as well, we definitely talked a lot about risk. We tended to look at it through a legal framework and an operational framework and a rain plan, that kind of stuff. But we actually did not use the term failure in the artistic sense, and in that sense of giving the artist freedom to produce and freedom to fail. So I'm just realizing as I'm thinking about this that we weren't looking, we were aspiring to an equal collaboration with these two and these communities, but we weren't regarding ourselves as artists in that. Does that make any sense? So I don't think we use the term failure because I just told people in the building, this is going to work out, like this isn't going to fail. But I didn't know that to be true. But now I'm thinking, we did talk about how to mitigate risk, and we made really, really smart choices about mitigating risk. I would love to have a conversation about, this might fail, but by like what metric, and which failures can we absorb and expect and learn from, and which failures do we really not want to accept, and so on and so forth. So I don't know, that's something to walk away and chew on, but it does make me think about institutions, how they position themselves with collaborating artists, and do they think of themselves as an artist too, if it's going to be one of these meta collaborations that's actually going to create something new and greater than the sum of its parts, So I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, because I think that in many times when you're trying something on an institutional level that's new, you have certain markers you want to reach, and I think the tendency is to say we put a lot of resources into that, we put a lot of staff energy, and it didn't achieve our goals. So we're gonna cut our losses, and we're gonna move on and pivot to the next thing as opposed to diving in deeper. And so as you're building something with the goal of it being sustained and ongoing, it's about, I guess, the question of how do you get that kind of institutional buy-in to kind of push beyond the fact that even after those 45 minutes, he might never reach that trick, but that doesn't mean that 3 nights later it might not get there.
Right, so Jason and Ben were really clear about that in the performance. That, in fact, Jason, one of the nights, did a really beautiful top-of-show announce when he talked about how musicians fail in studios and in basement sessions, and skaters fail in streets and parks all the time, and yet there are albums where you get the performance that's locked and doesn't fail. There is like, someone's going to win the X Games, and maybe you care, maybe you don't, but that's like, whatever. Anyhow, the artists were there to fail right in front of the audience, and how brave that was and how beautiful that was. I mean, that was some of the language
it's more also that that the Kennedy Center, and what we tried to do was not think of just us as the artists. It was whoever stepped on and signed that waiver, that they were the artist. So you had thousands of people who became artists in that moment, who then took the stage. All those, 15, 20 bands that came and played, everyone kind of had a point in it. So then when they left, the artist goes home. The artist goes back into the community to share. That's the one thing we don't really know what happens. It's like once all those thousands of people walk back into their communities and talk about, so what'd you do last weekend? Oh, I went to the Kennedy Center. For what? Oh, they had a skate park out there. What you mean? Well, then they had this band there. Who band? And then you say this band. Did you hurt yourself? Yeah, I have a broken leg right now, but I'm going back next week because my friend is getting, And for me, that's what I know we miss, right? We miss how the conversation lingers. We really miss it, And I love hearing people's stories about how they still think about something they experienced. All of us in this room have experienced the performance years and years ago that rings so intrinsic to who we think we are. We felt it in our bones, and we know that. And so we want to make things. How do you give platforms? How does an institution give a platform to an artist they trust that then will have an audience be totally affected by it and recall it for the rest of their life? Make that kind of work. That's the person falling from the top of that ramp. I mean, this is such a committal level that we have to go for that I know we just don't do all the time. We do it maybe every once in a while, but if we really go there, really hard, right? Like I have to learn these Philip Glass pieces in a couple of months. I am scared because I know I'll play lots of wrong notes. but I'm actually going to try to play all right notes for one time in my life. And that for me is rigorous, you know. So, you know, like I want an audience to feel the pressure, right? And I want them to feel that when they walk out. And so I think that's what we were trying to aim for. Not that we were the artists, it was that the audience came in and they became the artists in that moment. And they felt what it like to be in front of the center themselves.
We got it. I'm getting the power fist from
sorry.
I like that. I'm getting get the power fist. I'm sorry, but can we just, we're going to wrap it up. We got a special surprise. But before we get to that, can we just give all these amazing creative minds? All right, you ready? Okay, so we're gonna bring it out by everyone stand up if you can. And do a stretch. We're gonna try to bring it out. This was supposed to be at the beginning, but they came from Brooklyn. So feel free to collaborate physically and put your hands together for the Brooklyn Marching Band. Oh! Oh! All right. Hold on, wait, don't leave yet. Hold up. Hold on, wait, come back. Oh, wait, come back. What's up? Wait, come back. Wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute, come back. Wait, hold on, bro. Hold on, wait, come back. Bro, man, wait, come back. Let's get some names and ages, man. Let's get him another hand. Let's get some names. All right. All right, go ahead.
My name is Kay Sean, and I'm 12 years old.
Okay. Everybody from Brooklyn? Okay, go on, bro.
My name is Kate, and I'm 10 years old.
All right.
My name is Ray Sean. I'm 16 years old.
All right.
My name is Roy, and I'm 16 years old.
All right. Did I get you?
My name is Ari, and I'm 13 years old.
All right, Ari.
My name is David, and I'm 13 years old.
Okay, all right.
My name is Makai, and I'm 14 years old.
All right, Makai. Yeah, okay.
My name is Makai, and I'm 11 years old.
Okay, all right. I get you? No, I got you. I got you. Okay, here's it.
My name is Kaden, and I'm 12 years old.
Okay, Katie.
My name is Gavin, and I'm 13 years old.
Okay, all right.
My name is Paris Leonce, and I'm 13 years old.
All right, soloist. Okay.
My name is Naeem, and I'm 13 years old.
All right, what's your name, man?
My name is Mr. Brown.
All right, now hold on. I got a question for you because we're talking about collaboration, right? So how did you put all these amazing young folks together in Brooklyn to, one more hand. So give us a quick, we got a quick time, but give us a quick on like what's the program, how'd you get it together?
We're an after-school program located in Brooklyn. We have 180 students who participate in our program.
Okay. Get on stage,
Kind of old. All right. Well, it's very appropriate that we're here today. This is actually the first public announcement that we've been inspired by Stomp. We've been inspired by Blue Man Group, all the percussive things, and we have an agreement with La Mama Theater to create our own.
Hey!
So
that's tight, man.
This particular group plus the dancers found out a week ago that we signed contracts for June 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th at the La Mama Theater. We're creating a production called Brooklyn United Live, and we're hoping that all the big guys will come and see to talk about what's possible for next steps for this group. So we're looking forward to taking this group on the road, and we're very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Let's see. All right, well, thank y'all so much for coming through. And can we give them one more hand right here for the young folks? All right. Bring it out. I was about to rap, but thank you. You're too. Great work. Thank you so much. Thank you, your words. Thanks, man. You too.
Thank you for attending. Please join us at 2 p.m. for the opening of the Expo Hall.